So first things first, John. How are
Yes,
you?
I'm great. How you doing,
I'm alright, thank you.
brother man? In
So
his house.
before we get on to your uh, latest album, your new
Yes,
album, I'd like
yes.
to jump back to the beginning quickly.
Mhm,
And well, you're from the New Orleans area,
mhm, mhm.
and I saw a segment with Stephen Colbert where you talked
Yes.
about hanging
Oh
and
wow, that was a while ago. Yeah, I took
but
Steven to New Orleans. We took him around and taught him how to hang out.
But what I wondered for somebody who's never been to New Orleans, and obviously it's very rich in musical tradition, what was it like growing up there in kind of the musical surroundings that you did?
Mhm. It's like growing up in a village. You have village elders who are knowledgeable and wise and have traveled far and wide and brought their
Mm,
experiences back to the village.
right.
And they were my teachers, the great Alvin Batiste, Ellis Marsalis, Clyde Kerr Jr., Kid Jordan. These four and a few others taught everyone over the last 50, 60 years in New Orleans music, thereabouts. And they were really my exposure to the musical superpowers
Mm,
of jazz and blues and soul and gospel and folk music, the African American diaspora.
mm,
And my father and his brothers and my 30 cousins or so had a band.
mm.
And I was always exposed to music either through them or through my teachers, and my peers are also all some of the best musicians in the world. So
Mm.
I was just surrounded by great culture, great food. It was an amazing thing for me.
Was there ever a moment where you didn't think you'd be a musician? Was there ever a time?
Oh yeah, I didn't always think I'd be a musician. I wasn't confirmed to be a musician in my mind until I was in New York City. I moved
Okay.
to New York when I was 17.
Mm,
And I was at the Juilliard School and I put together my band in my first album. And it was really, really special to me because in New Orleans, there was a sense of music as a way of life.
mm,
There's music to dance to, but there's also music when someone is born. There's music when someone dies. There's music to sleep. There's music to eat. So it wasn't like music was a profession for me. It was
mm.
more, this is what we all do. And now in New York, I'm by myself. And with that, you find your identity, your manhood. You grow into your own. And that's what I did. And by the time I was 18 or 19, I was very certain that this was what I was going to do.
At that time, what did you discover about yourself as a individual and as a musician? Around this time, 18,
Yes,
19.
I discovered that I was, at 18 and 19, you're also defining your taste.
Right.
And I discovered my taste not only in music, but my taste in people, in
Mm,
my tribe. I built my tribe. And these are people who are your chosen family.
mm,
Maybe not your blood family, but
sure.
I found those people. And once I did, I really discovered purpose in that. I didn't think about what I wanted to achieve musically first. It came after we were in the right people. You get the right people on the right seats on the bus, and then you figure out where you want to go. Take the bus. Jim Collins, shout out. But yeah, so that's really what I did.
Okay.
And once I discovered that, I found that I wanted to make music that brought people together in ways that I wasn't seeing happening in any music scene.
Mm,
I had the chance to play with Prince, I mentioned
sure.
earlier, Lenny Kravitz, Wynton Marsalis, so many greats at this time, Abby Lincoln, Roy Hargrove, from all different genres of music. And by the time I was about 23 or 24, I decided that I wanted to just lead my own band. And that's when Stay Human was born. So between 18 to 24, I really found my musical direction.
And that's an interesting point because obviously growing up in New Orleans with the rich diversity they have there, all kinds of cultures. But then, it, can I say that you also insisted yourself once you went to New York to try out all kinds of different, and that's where the eclectic kind of nature of your music comes from?
Well, we're in an age of the internet.
Sure.
And the internet gives you access to anything at the touch of a button. And culture is much more connected now than if you think about before the internet, you had to go and buy a CD, and you could listen to one thing at a time. And if you wanted to change it, you had to change the disc and all these different things. And I'm at the cusp of when I was 12, there was no real internet. When I was 13, everything changed. So it's not only that I was able to be in these cities of New Orleans and New York, which are very diverse and experience so many things at a very young age. I was also touring when I was 16, 17 around the world, playing and experiencing meeting people. But I also was a part of this internet generation where there are no barriers. So the generation, even after me, they're so free. When I perform for them or engage with them, they're not thinking about genres or anything. They're thinking about experiences. And that's the beauty of my upbringing. I had both. I had this actual experience with culture, and I also had this freedom of just information being at the touch of a button. So I don't have the same mentality as some of the older musicians who may have the same training as I had.
Right. In that sense, do you remember one of the first people you kind of delved into on YouTube? So somebody you kind of really fell down the rabbit hole in for?
I did a lot of listening to so many pianists, obviously, as I was studying at Juilliard, and singers as well. Nina Simone, someone I really have listened to a lot. Thelonious Monk. I listened to many Thelonious Monk recordings. There was one year that I listened to Thelonious Monk almost exclusively for the whole year. And that was a real change in my artistry. I absorbed his artistry into mine.
What was it about him? What was it about him that struck you?
Well, Thelonious Monk had a very unique way of playing the piano. You hear one note and you know that it's him. And his melodies and compositions are the same. They follow suit in that they're so unique that even if someone else is playing them, you know it's him. And that's a really difficult thing to do. So I was struck by that. And also, I had been developing an idea, a musical idea. And it's funny because the idea that I'd been developing was along the lines of his style, but I didn't know his style yet. I hadn't discovered him yet. So I was thinking in the same way that he had thought 40 years earlier, but I didn't know he existed. Then I discovered his music, and I was like, oh, that's what I was trying to figure out. Is a similar style. So we're kindreds in a lot of ways. I discovered some musicians who are kindred to me that I'm not familiar with, and it really is exciting because it makes you feel as though you're in conversation with them.
This is a nice little segue then, I think, to your album, Hollywood Africans, because it's very much a feeling of respecting those that came before. So that idea of I mean, I read how this album came together in 2013, how it started, but how important are just to explain, how
Yeah.
important are the people who've kind of opened doors, and how important are those people for you?
It's amazing that people can come from the sharecroppers or
Right.
come from slaves or come from such small and humble beginnings, and even have oppression and marginalization as a normal part of their life, and create this amazing energy that's just like bridging the gaps of all of the world that would separate us. People come to the room together to experience the music and the art and the innovation. It's an amazing thing to see how much these people have shaped and changed the world. even when some of them didn't make it, some of them had to die for us to be able to enjoy and experience these things that now enrich our life. And that's really important to me because you don't choose what lineage you're born into. And I happen to be born into the lineage of performers from New Orleans, jazz musicians, now entertainers on television. There's so many lineages that I'm connected to just as a part of my life. It's almost as if it's a calling. So I think that's when you can make the most powerful art, when you're connected to who you are and you're authentically expressing that. So I am a part of these lineages, and I'm also writing the next chapter of it.
Right. That idea of establishing who you are, finding who you are, is that an easy thing to do? It sounds to me it's a very difficult thing to know who you are.
It's difficult. That's the biggest thing in anyone's life, to figure out who you are, what you stand for,
Right.
what you're about. I think that that's why, for me at this point in my life, and this album is really a celebration for me of discovering something about who I am, almost as if it's the beginning. I've made albums before this, but
Sure.
they're all albums that I made as I was discovering myself, and I didn't have really much of a supervision. It was just independent albums. We made them, put them on the internet, no promotion, anything. We toured and played, and every one of them is different because every one is a different phase in my development. Like the one we did with the trio is after I listened to Monk for a year, so you hear that on the album. The first one I did when I was a teenager was about my times in New Orleans. Then I made another one that was in the subways where we were playing with Stay Human and doing what we call these love riots, where we just have 100 people with us and we're processing through the streets and playing music.
Sure.
In any place in the world. We've done it several places in the world. And now I feel like this album is a statement of just me going to the basics as I've now discovered and almost been reborn into a new me. This is who I am. I've first discovered myself on this album. So it's a real true testament to my direction in the future. This is almost the beginning.
Okay.